Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rafegal, and this is Final Fantasy VI. Sorry, I wanted to get that in before the sting hit. So, Final Fantasy is a really well-known series. It's one of the most popular JRPG series of all time. It's 30 years old at this point. This is my personal favorite Final Fantasy game, and the first JRPG that I really played. This was my gateway. So, we're going to get started. I will explain why this is the version we're playing, and give a little bit of history about the game, the series, as it goes through this intro. It has a pretty long intro. I'm going to try and fill in these areas by talking about some other topics other than the game itself, except when there's plot or awesome music. That's really important. This is all background information. It's appropriate to the themes, but it's not going to be super impactful. But please read along while you listen, I guess. So yeah, Final Fantasy, and I guess as a clarification here, I am not going through and citing my sources on this. Some of these are anecdotal, some of these are things that I half remember that I heard years ago, as far as the facts go. And I do want to clarify also, I'm probably going to make some comments as we're going through this about why this game is good and why other games are bad. And I don't want that to be a thing. I don't want to offend anyone. I know people are kind of bad about... I make a differentiation between things that I like and things that are good. And just because I say a negative thing about something doesn't mean I hate it, or that it's awful. It means that it has some negative things. Obviously, all of this is my opinion, but I try and present my opinions with some objectivity behind them. So, with all those disclaimers out of the way, the legend goes that Final Fantasy is named Final Fantasy because it was the last effort of Hironobu Sakaguchi, who's kind of the father of Final Fantasy. He was going to give up and on the gaming industry. He was having trouble breaking in, and this was his big last project that he was going to do. Obviously, the first game went well, and more came from there. We're up to 15 now. He's kind of one of the three godfathers of Final Fantasy in my mind. The other two being Yoshitaka Amano, who is the concept art director, and music by Nobuo Uematsu, who is the head composer for the game. The games as a whole are kind of loosely connected in terms of mechanics and themes. You know, you have a party of 3 to 5 characters, turn-based battles, menus, class and magic systems that are very similar. Story-wise, they tend to be, good against evil, stopping the apocalypse, beat the big bad. There's a lot of themes of technology versus magic, of corruption and redemption, and some environmental sub-themes throughout. There's little just object themes that carry throughout, crystals, airships, creatures like Moogles and Chocobos, and, of course, guys named Sid. To me, Final Fantasy VI is kind of the point where all of this stuff comes together. It's a transition point between the modern games and the classic games, which I'll explain in a moment. And it is one of the games that best identifies the themes that I mentioned and the things that hold the game together. So, we're started in the game here, but that's okay. Oh, and I totally forgot to do a couple things. We're going to do auto dash. We're going to turn messages up to 1. We're going to turn battle speed up to 6. And I'm going to hope that that works for this particular system. So, as I was saying, the games before this point are very much what I'd kind of consider the classic Final Fantasy games. They're all 4 warriors of light that go and, save the crystals pretty much across the board. They have very limited or fixed party members, and they tend to be very focused on this class system that I've mentioned. Let's see if we can get this. This may not work. Here's the thing I'm trying to do. Nope. Okay. That's okay. We're learning. So yeah. They also the games before this also tended to have the more traditional fantasy setting. There's a lot more, like swordsmen and knights. Whereas this one, the classes include things like, the engineer. There's, straight up, we've got the steampunk armor right off the gate here. There we go. That's what I was trying to do. Games after this point, with the exception of 9, which I'll talk about in a second, I've noticed that the games tend to be less diverse in the character pool, mechanically, especially. And the characters tend to be more customizable, and there tends to be less work put into that aspect of them. Things like very limited equipment pool, or slots for it. Things like magic that's not assigned to the characters inherently, or characters that are very customizable eventually, where they may start with a leaning towards one thing and be very fluid as the game goes on. Basically to the point where everyone can do anything if you really work at it, to various degrees. Whoops. This is also, as far as a lot of things go, to me this is the game that has the strongest cast of characters in terms of, especially in terms of a strong protagonist. And the main reason I say that is because the game doesn't have a single protagonist. We have a central point of view character at the beginning of the game, but it shifts around as the game progresses. And it shifts around based on what the goals in the stories are, and what the story is about. And I think it's really cool that a game is willing to do that. Something that I feel like, especially in certain later Final Fantasy games, is significantly missing. As the protagonists, the point of view characters, are very loosely connected to the stories. I feel like this game not only has a character that is connected to the story, but multiple characters. From a historical perspective, this is one of the earlier games with an active time battle system, and one of the more complex active time battle systems. It is it has the traditional 4 party members. It has a full equipment system. Meaning you have, I believe, 6 slots for equipment, plus 2 relic slots, plus an Esper slot. It's probably the most diverse as far as equipment goes of any of the games, as far as I can think of. It has does not have traditional fantasy classes. It doesn't have a white mage, black mage, but it does have characters at the beginning of the game with specifically limited magic usage. Whoops. We're gonna get hit with lightning. That's okay. So yeah, the characters are more defined by who they are. They all still have unique commands and equipment sets to an extent, where there's crossover, but the characters are still limited to what they can specifically do. There's no you can't make everybody do everything. There's a few times where you're going to have limited party members, but by the end of the game, at 2 different points even, you're going to have full control of who is in your party, out of a cast of 14 characters by the end, which is, I believe, the highest from any standard Final Fantasy game. And despite this, most of the characters don't feel watered down. There's a few characters who get kind of shortchanged, but most of them have fairly robust background. They're connected to the story. And there's only a couple exceptions that I would say that don't really have that feeling to them, which we'll get into when we get to those characters. I also feel like this is the game that emphasizes Amano's art style best out of all the games, because of the style of sprites that it uses, and because of his involvement with it. When you see the portraits for the characters, which we'll get to, I feel like they're still sprites, but because of the detail level in the sprites and the earthy tones that get used throughout this game, compared to some of the other games that use more simple, colorful sprites because of the limitations at the time, there's a lot more similarity to the original Amano art in these. And I think it reflects his style while still being true to what the game is trying to look like. Because his style's kind of weird sometimes. It's cool, but it's kind of weird. And it's also, in my opinion, one of the best examples of Nobuo Uematsu's work. Especially if you've heard orchestral and vocal versions of some of his work from this game, they are straight up masterpieces. There's a few of the themes that only get used very briefly or for specific scenes, but they're still some of his most well-known works. So, that's why I like this game from the Final Fantasy series. It's a very wordy way of putting it, but I feel like this is kind of the central point. This is the crux that leads to the modern era, but still holds on to that classic feeling. This is the Game Boy Advance remake of the game, with a patch applied to restore the SNES sound. The reason I chose this version is because the text, the translation in this version is a lot cleaner. There's some parts in the original that were badly translated because it's an early game. And they made some choices that were interesting when you're aware of the actual context. Let's see, what level are we at? 5. Yep, we're gonna go ahead and grind out a few more levels here. So this game in particular, or this version of the game in particular, also has some bugs that were removed, which isn't a huge deal, but is something that I appreciate. Unfortunately, it kind of changed the music, which is why we're using the patch, because of the different capabilities between the Game Boy and the Super Nintendo. This game also has some additional endgame material that is not present in the other games, other versions of the game. It has a whole extra dungeon, which we may or may not end up doing, and some extra espers, which we'll get into later. The main reason is because I feel like this is the most complete, definitive version of the game. The Super Nintendo original, like I said, had some bad translations. There's some more censorship because of the era it came out during, when Nintendo was very strict about censorship. There were more bugs, like substantially more bugs, which again isn't something that you'd notice unless you were looking for it. But considering that I like to delve into some of the more mechanical side of games for the most part, and specifically the fact that I like to, kind of learn the systems so that I can be efficient with them and break them, I tended to do that, and it makes the game less fun. And I realized that you could just, not do that, but it's there. The details are all here, the graphics are the same, but the color palette is actually a little bit brighter. on the Game Boy Advance version, which is fine. It's also a different aspect ratio, which will hopefully still work or work better on YouTube. We will find out. Most of my games record at I can't remember what aspect ratio I set it at, but most of them have that the black borders on both sides, and the reason for that is because of the aspect ratio I record at. It's also because I'm lazy and I don't like changing between different games that I run and games that run full screen versus the emulator games are going to run differently. But I feel like this version will hopefully be a good representation and be interesting. And if you haven't seen some of the cool stuff that they added in this version, it's something that you may not be familiar with, which brings something new to a classic, which is kind of one of the things I like to do. It's one of the reasons I put off running this game for so long, even though it's my favorite, because I like giving that. I like the idea of showing somebody something new instead of just something they've seen. So yeah, with all of that background out of the way, this is Final Fantasy VI. We're already like 10 minutes in. We are currently playing as Terra, who was enslaved by the Empire. We've gotten a little bit of information. We're going to see another cutscene with that that explains that more shortly. The first thing you saw me do is change the battle speed to 6 and the message speed to 1. The reason for that is the battle speed affects the enemy's speed, not yours. And the message speed affects everything. So that's going to make the game run faster. It's going to be safer for us. The enemies are going to be less aggressive, and we're going to be able to have an easier time. You saw me a couple times there at the beginning attempting to run away from battles. I didn't have as much luck as I have in previous versions, and part of that's probably a learning curve for this version of the game. The reason for that was I was trying to get the two characters who aren't going to be going with us after this, who are no longer with us already at this point, to run away so that Terra could get all the experience points for that. We want to get her up to... we only needed to get her level 6, but I'm going to push here for 7 because I was talking. And I figured I would continue to do so while I finished up my thoughts. And the reason we do that is because the level that Terra is at is going to affect what level everyone else in the game comes in. Everyone who joins the party will be coming in at a level based on the average party level with some sort of modifier. So leveling Terra up 1 or 2 more extra levels now actually makes a huge impact down the road because it affects what the next character joins at, which affects what the next characters join at. It requires less grinding in the future, basically. It also makes the game a little easier, which not that it really needs it at this point. It's not, there's some difficult parts of the game, but the curve is fine. So we've seen already, Terra's been described as being able to use magic. We know that she can use magic because we have the menu. She's been described as possessing Magitech, at least briefly. And we've learned that she has been controlled by the Empire. There we go. So, the Empire, we're gonna get... like I said, a bit more of a glimpse of it, but we've kind of already got this vibe that the Empire's bad news. they made it harder to run away in this. And Terra's kind of an unwilling victim. She's wakes up, she's confused, she doesn't remember, she has amnesia, things are slowly coming back to her, but she's been used as basically a weapon for the time leading up to this. She's assaulted these innocent people in Narsh. She was forced to go try and help take the Esper out of the mines that they've discovered. And now she is being hunted down. She's trying to run away from them, although she doesn't really understand everything about why. So, here we get introduced to Kefka and the Empire in general. Kefka is an amazing villain because he takes pleasure in those aspects of control and inflicting pain. He laughs about it. Him laughing is a very common theme throughout it, and it really emphasizes where he stands on things to another level. We see here the Empire as a whole. We see Gestal, who is the Emperor, and his 3 generals. We see some kind of very stormtrooper style soldiers down here. We see Kefka, Leo, and Celis, his generals, who we will get to know better as the game goes on. And one of my favorite parts of the Empire is that while they do a great job of representing these teams of corruption and progress and technology that I've talked about, they cover a range of it. They don't all approach it from the same way. And they have their own, each of the characters has their own opinions about it. Okay, so now we get introduced to Locke. Treasure hunter and trail-worn traveler, searching the world over for relics of the past. Locke is, again, one of our kind of central protagonists. Prefers the term treasure hunting to robbing and plundering. We see the signature finger wag, which is one of the other things I was going to mention here. Both with Kefka's laughing, with the way that Terra moves, with Locke's shocked reaction and the finger wag, we see already these characters have very expressive sprites, despite the size and simplicity of the system. We also see here things like details of a fireplace with animated fire. We see very detailed floor, like the stones in the floor. The sprite work in this game is phenomenal. It is extremely detailed for the era. And if you compare it to earlier JRPGs especially, they're very simplistic in the color palettes they use, in the structure they put together. So we're going to have this little... I'm not sure why they put this so early, because it's so complex for the time where it comes up. Okay, so we're going to get help from some Moogles, one of the iconic creatures I mentioned. We're not going to get an explanation. So we can switch between the different parties here. We're going to... Mog is the only one we can actually equip, or unequip in this case. We're going to put this guy in front, and then we're going to have Locke make his way down. And we're actually going to... Well, we'll go ahead and get into a couple fights here. We're just going to basically plow through. So you're not actually supposed to get access to Mog's equipment yet, but he is a future party member, so you can equip him. The equipment he had is much better than what we're going to be having for quite some time. So we're going to be equipping that on one of the characters who can actually use it coming up. That's unfortunate. Okay. I do not have any tonics, unfortunately. So we're just going to go ahead into the boss fight here and hope it works. Okay, so we're going to start off. We've got this guard leader. And we're going to have Locke start out by stealing from him. He'll give us a mithril knife, which is another good early equipment piece. And then we're going to have the Moogles focus on these background guys first. One of our characters got hit with stop, which means he's just straight up not acting right now. And the rest of this is mostly just going to be... Well, we're going to go ahead and use a high potion on Locke. We want to make sure he survives to get that XP. If a Moogle dies, we don't care. That sounds awful, but that's how it works. It's not a ton, but it's fine. Okay, so... Thanks, Moogles, we're in your debt. One of the other neat things with Locke is right away we see that there are people who are opposed to the Empire, who have suffered under it. Locke's reaction to hearing who Terra is very strong. We also see that he has depth as a character right off the bat, because he has that strong reaction to the Empire, but he also has this very visceral reaction to the idea of her being in danger, of her being controlled. And he promises, right off the bat, to protect her and to stay by her side until she gets her memory back. The fact that he says that, despite his reactions regarding the Empire, says a lot. Okay, we're gonna go into the Beginner's Hall, which is, this is kind of the tutorial room. And the reason we're going in here is there's items. There's also a monster in a box fight, which is fine. It's a very simple fight. It's something we've already fought several times before. Oops. I know there's at least one other character. This guy? Nope. Okay. Well, in that case, I'm not concerned. I don't want to go through the whole thing. If we try to go back, we're going to get a message saying we can't. Better hightail it south to Figaro. Okay. Once again, that little expressive things like Locke blinking his eyes there, or this, and the details there of the wheel, the animated wheel, and the smoke, just for purely background pieces. It's something you don't see in a lot of Super Nintendo games. I want to point those out when I get the chance. So, I think we can probably do a little bit more. Let's do a little bit more. We're gonna go through here real quick and equip. I throw knife. I throw shield. Get our first random, first glimpse at random encounters in this game. Which is a bunny. We're gonna steal with Locke because potions are good. And I would prefer to get them from enemies we're gonna be fighting anyway, rather than buying them. And create a little paradox there. People who've played the game will understand that, and I'll point it out when we get there. Okay. Yeah, we'll go through, we'll get through this part. That'll work. Oh, it's you, proceed. Okay, so we find the Figaro Castle in the desert here, and we are greeted with the Figaro theme. Which is a little brassier than I remember. Okay, I'm gonna double check real quick here. Yeah, no. We won't worry about it. Okay. And we get introduced to Edgar. How rude of me to turn my back on a lady on our very first meeting. So, once again, we get introduced to a character who is immediately very layered. Edgar is the king. He is young. We're going to find out very quickly that he is very technologically inclined. We know that he is associated with returners. Well, we don't know that word yet. We know he's against the Empire. But he states already that Figaro and the Empire are allies. And we get these very flirtatious lines right off the bat. What's the matter? Guess my technique's getting a little rusty. Once again, we see her head lower, that very expressive sprite, and she is... her naive... she's accidentally rebuffed him with her naivety. We're going to take a little detour here. No, not that one. over to the matron, or the high priestess in this version, where we hear Edgar had a twin brother. And we get a little bit of their background. We get a little... I love the fact that they put this little teaser in here. We know already, from the way that that's established, Sabin's going to be a party member at some point. Only party members have that screen presented. But we don't really know past that point. There's a lot left to question with that, and we really don't get to have it come to fruition until we've gotten lots of good build-up to it. And I think that the tease there and the build-up is actually one of the things I really like about this game. It does a great job applying this foreshadowing where you know something's going to come up, but it sometimes will tell you one thing and oops. I got ahead of myself. That's what happens sometimes when I'm talking. I like the fact that it foreshadows things. I like the fact that it, gives you these little glimpses of what's going to be coming up with things like Sabin. Someone from the Empire here to see you. Kefka, no doubt. And we get a great glimpse of what Kefka's like. Ahem, there's sand on my boots. It's one of my favorite lines that really says a lot about Kefka as a character. And it is a great example of why I love him as a villain. Some of the best villains are both entertaining but still funny, or entertaining but still scary. That's a tough one. There are more girls in here than grains of sand in the desert. Man couldn't possibly keep track of them all. Kefka levels some veiled threats. And we move on. And once again, maybe a little ahead of myself, but I think that's okay in this case. By the way, one random thing, the Super Nintendo version, you always move at the slower pace. Terra's kind of has another conflict of interests here. She's told that they're against the Empire, but she's an Imperial. They were using you, that's all. Things are different now. It's easy to say that, but she doesn't understand. And once again, Locke kind of encourages her, but at the same time confuses her a bit more, puts a little bit more out there. How will I know which choice is right? So, one of the things will briefly point out that I appreciate here is, despite Edgar being very flirtatious, there's no push for a romantic subplot here. It's presented as a character trait, and despite the fact that he is flirtatious, he's also respectful. He doesn't press, he backs off, which makes him a better character as a whole, in my opinion, because it speaks on him as a person. So Kefka, despite, being this clown or having this clown-like appearance and, being concerned about sand on his boots, has just set the castle on fire. Luckily for us, Edgar kind of assumed he was going to have a problem, or he was going to betray us. So Edgar's going to escape on chocobos. Locke and Terra join. And Edgar says, sink her into the sand. His castle has a dive mode. This is where you first really see Edgar is more than just some king, some flirt. He is a brilliant engineer. And we get our fight against these Magitech soldiers. We're also going to get our first glimpse of the auto crossbow, which is the first of Edgar's tool skills that we're going to get access to. We're going to go ahead and get the cutscene for this out of the way, because we're not doing a speedrun, and so when Terry uses magic, they freak out. And there's this great little interaction where they freak out and are kind of pressing her about this. And she shows a little bit more personality once it kind of sinks into them. So, just to clarify there, auto crossbow is very powerful. The tool commands in general are very powerful for the beginning of the game. And in particular, the auto crossbow is going to be one of the things we use the most. Son of a sandworm? Originally that was son of a submariner in the SNES version. Like I said, there's some just minor changes to the script throughout it. superpowers come naturally. No human is born with the powers you have. Oh. Way to go, Edgar. We get another awesome rendition of one of Terra's themes. Okay, we get our first Chocobo ride. Although we don't get the music to go with it. Okay. Recovery Spring heals us. I just realized I didn't ever equip Edgar, which I should do. We're going to continue stealing for a chunk of time here, mostly because Edgar is going to be killing everything on the screen in one hit. We are also going to be running through this dungeon, not picking up anything. And the reason for that is pretty simple. When you open these treasure chests at a later time, the items become more valuable. You will get different items depending on when it's open. So we're going to get them our second time through, when the items will be more useful to us. Also, keep forgetting to do this, so we're going to get that switched out right now. The auto crossbow is an attack. It goes based on his attacking stat, his physical attack stat. So equipping a stronger weapon like the Mithril Spear will actually improve his auto crossbow damage still. I believe this is the way out. Yep. Okay. We get the standard overworld theme finally, which is also one of the other version of Terra's theme, or Terra's other theme, I guess. There is a wonderful rendition of it, which I will actually see if I can include a link to, that I really appreciate, called Terra on Black. I can't remember if it's an official version or if it's a fan-made one, but either way, I will link to that in the description. So, we're going to go ahead and save here, because we haven't saved in a while. And I'm going to put this as the end of the first video. I feel like we've talked about a lot in a fairly short amount of time, and I feel like this is a good demonstration of what I'm kind of going to be hopefully touching on in these videos as we go. Obviously, we're not going to talk about the history of the series every single time, but my intention is to talk about the game itself, as well as the themes of that game, of the game as we go through, and kind of tying it into some of the other games more than likely. I will also, given the fact that this game does have some cutscenes and some points where we're going to be grinding for either levels or magic or items as the game progresses, I do want to touch on some other things. And those are going to be the times when I'm going to try and go back to the either broader subjects, or if people watching have questions, I'll try to answer them during those sections of the run, especially towards the end. There's going to be 2 or 3 sections towards the end of the game that are going to be very tedious. I may not film all of them, but I'll at least I'll at least do a demonstration of what we're doing. Maybe I'll do a video just showing the 3 places we're grinding and then go grind off stream. But yeah, I feel like this is going to be, or can turn out to be, a good video series. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. There's a lot to say about this game. I'm going to try not to repeat myself. I'm not going to try to explain when I have positive things and negative things to say about this game and others. And try to be both analytical and objective going through it. Hopefully, you're enjoying it so far. If you are, give me a like and subscribe. Check out some of the other content on my channel. Feel free to leave any questions or suggestions you might have in the comments. Like I said, I'll try to answer questions if they're relevant right away, or as they come up. I do have some notes I'm going off of what I want to talk about as we go through. I'm hoping that will be a good way to work in questions people have as well. And as always, have a good one. Catch you next time with probably everything up to the River, maybe. See you next time.